It was late evening, and I found myself sitting in my room staring at the clock ticking away each second. As though it were a reminder of how empty the space felt, my phone buzzed with a message from a classmate, someone I didn't know particularly well, but someone who had always been friendly enough in passing in class. The message was short and simple, asking if I was free, and if I wanted company. It felt strange to say no, so I replied with a quick "sure, come over." I stood up from my chair and began to tidy up the room, pushing aside scattered books and stray notes from the previous week of lectures, when I heard the soft knock on the door. I opened it to see her standing there, holding a bottle of something in one hand, and wearing a smile that seemed to light up the hallway. She stepped inside without hesitation, looking around with curious eyes, as if trying to piece together who I was from the items in the room. She set the bottle on the small table in the corner of the room, and asked if I had glasses. I fumbled for a moment, opening and closing the wrong cabinet, before finally finding two slightly mismatched glasses, which I placed on the table as she opened the bottle and poured the liquid, its scent filling the air. We sat down cross-legged on the rug, because the small space did not offer much seating, and we began to talk. At first, it was the kind of talk that you have with someone you barely know, all surface-level topics and polite exchanges. But as the bottle grew lighter and our laughter grew louder, the conversation shifted to things that felt more real. She told me about how she had been feeling lost lately, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that seemed to weigh on her every step. And I found myself sharing things I didn't even know I had been holding on to. We talked about our families, our fears, our dreams, and the things we thought we had buried deep enough that they would never see the light of day. The room seemed to grow warmer, not from the alcohol, though that certainly played a role, but from the connection that was forming between two people who had never taken the time to really see each other before the world outside. The room seemed to fade away, and it felt like the walls of this small space were the only things holding the universe together. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes half closed as she spoke about a memory from her childhood, one that she hadn't thought about in years, and I listened as if every word was a treasure, as if in that moment nothing else mattered but her voice and the way it filled the room. When the bottle was finally empty, we sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. But it was not an awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that felt full of understanding, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words or noise. I don't remember who moved first or how it happened, but at some point, our hands found each other. And for a brief moment, it felt like the weight of everything we had been carrying was lifted, as if, just for that night, the world had paused to let us breathe. She stayed until the first light of morning crept through the window, neither of us wanting to be the first to break the spell. And when she finally stood to leave, there was no need for long goodbyes or promises. It was as if we both understood that what had happened in that room was something rare and unspoken, something that didn't need to be defined. She left, and I closed the door behind her, standing there for a moment in the quiet that had returned to the room. It felt different now, though, as if the space itself had been changed by the night, by the connection by her. As the days went on, we saw each other in class, exchanging knowing glances that spoke of the things we had shared without the need for words. The world outside that room kept turning, but I knew that something in me had shifted that night, something I couldn't quite put into words, and maybe didn't need to. The memory of that evening remained with me, like the fading scent of the bottle we had shared, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments are the ones that leave the deepest marks on us. And though life continued as it always does, that night in my room with my classmate and the shared drink stayed with me, not as a moment to relive, but as a moment to cherish for what it was,